Hey, welcome to another episode of Clear Light Connections, where we talk to the people behind the businesses of Bay Area Houston. We are proudly sponsored by UTMB Health. Special guest today is Captain Pean, and you are with the UTMB Police System?
Correct. Yep.
And you were telling me something interesting before we started, that you're actually part of the University of Texas Police System.
Correct.
Which gives you pretty much statewide jurisdiction.
Yes, we our commission is being held by the Regents and UT system, and so there's one of 14 components, and so all of us wear the same uniform, have the same police units for the most part. So we can, if there was a big incident like a hurricane or any kind of critical incident at other institutions, we can kind of trade off and be mutual aid for each other. So we're one of 14, but so we have statewide jurisdiction because anywhere in the state of Texas where the University of Texas owns or leases property, we have jurisdiction in that county. So it ends up being like 98% of the state.
That's amazing. So it just gives people a sense of how big the University of Texas system is.
Yeah, it's huge. It's everywhere. Anytime even if you just got one little satellite clinic, that then gives us jurisdiction for that county.
But you in particular, you're down in Galveston and League City, and I guess up here at Clear Lake as well because of UTMB.
Yeah, so our main campus is down in Galveston on the island, and then we have one at League City, one at Webster, the Clear Lake campus, and then one out in Angleton. So we're in Harris County, Galveston, and Brazoria County.
And you guys, there's a big focus right now on workplace violence.
Right.
And you have kind of an interesting dichotomy because not only are you a huge workplace with the hospital system, but you're also a school. So tell me what that means to your department specifically.
I think for policing, generally speaking, we have a very extremely unique environment for our campus because we've got a level 1 trauma. We've got helicopters that are coming and going at all of our campuses. We've also got like the cruise ship right there. We've got critical infrastructures all around. We're also School of Nursing, School of Medicine. We've got multiple graduate schools programs going. And we've also got the Galveston element to where you've got a summer tourist vibe and huge events like Mardi Gras or Biker Rally. So we have this whole milieu of different circumstances that cause us to not really have typical days very often. So we have to put on different hats depending on what we're dealing with. And we also have the BSL-4 lab down there that we're in charge of security for also. And so,
but you guys have a very heightened training that you've been through, and you help train others in this kind of situation. So
active shooter is obviously a hot topic right now, even more so. It's been for a while, but ever since Uvalde, it kind of went straight to the top again. So everybody's doing vast amounts of training on everything from breaching to, coordinated responses to tabletops to incident command and everything. So we've recently just put I think 6 classes on where we had all the DPS in the region were down training with us, as well as the county and a couple of other departments that were putting some people in. So we have a fair amount of instructors. We also do the civilian active response, and so that allows for us to be able to get the staff and the visitors or students prepared for how to react to something like that. But yes, I mean, the fact that workplace violence is happening everywhere to include active shooter type situations, unfortunately, it's getting more and more broad as far as the type of environments that those are happening. But the risk factors are always going to be with school campuses, schools, and hospitals.
So I read this interesting fact that I guess a mass shooting is defined by any shooting where there's at least 4 people involved. And the number,
usually one location.
Yeah, and the number has, I think it was by mid-year this year, we'd already had more than double the previous year. What's going on with that?
If I had the answer to that, I would not be working as a police captain. I'd be out trying to figure it all out. No, so I know 2021 had 61 active shooter incidents, and then 2020 had 40, and then there were 30 in 2018 and 19. So whatever is going on is increasing, and that's kind of scary because it's happening at grocery stores and everything. But in addition to that, I think that a lot of it with the pandemic has probably added a lot of stressors to everybody, whether people were having to deal with kids at home or whether they were laid off or whether the work from home element added different dynamics to things. Then you have a healthcare system that's like overloaded. So we've had workplace violence shoot up pretty dramatically in just about every way that it can. And so we've had to kind of come up with a lot of different ways to kind of combat that and try and make sure that we can do the best that we can, because the system's already like I said, overloaded. People are stressed, especially the nurses that are working, twice as many shifts as they would have. And people are just coming in agitated. It's just a scary time for everybody.
So do you guys, I know you offer training to other law enforcement agencies. You also mentioned that you guys will you train businesses and other entities on?
Yeah, we've done some, we've done community type education training events, just how to respond, what to look out for. It's kind of like the see something, say something, what are risk behaviors and stuff like that. And then how to respond, like looking somebody from head to toe, because a lot of people will be like, okay, well, what did they look like? And they'll kind of bounce around trying to see what's standing out to their memory. When the better way to do it is to just like, okay, I've got a white female with blue top, blue leggings, white shoes. So just go top to bottom and then just methodically read it out. And it makes it a lot easier for us to get the information and disseminate it.
So what should our business owners be doing to kind of heed the warning sign? What are those warning signs? What should we be looking for as business owners and business people within our businesses?
So there's no 100% perfect way to predict, when somebody has a full propensity for violence and whether they could get to that level, unfortunately. But there's anybody that's got like an altered mental status or mental illness, those are risk factors, or they're under the influence of something. Generally, all workplace violence is predicted by verbal threats or just verbal aggressiveness. And so when you actually look at how workplace violence is defined these days, like by OSHA and other organizations, they are defining it as it's everything that could be related to it. So it's like physical assaults to verbal threats to intimidation to aggressive body language, harassment. So everything is being included in it because it's all predictive up to a certain point. And so I guess the better that we can articulate and understand how much of an issue it is and it's better to have an all-inclusive standpoint than it is to only include assaults, because at that point it's already gotten to an escalated point where things have gotten physical. And so if we really understand where the buildup is, then we understand how to better prevent it and then intervene. And so I think that for business owners, there's always going to be hardened security, which is a smarter way to just do things, protect yourself, be aware of situational awareness, what's around, who's around, what looks out of place. Make sure that your stuff is, your door's locked, windows locked. Anything that's vulnerable, you could always try and have, ask a family friend or something like, hey, see, how would you get into my place? It always helps to put yourself in the bad guy's shoes. And then people can get creative, and sometimes it's stuff that you wouldn't have even thought of. And so being able to take those type of measures into account help. And then camera systems, obviously, the better systems that can record for longer or have a longer retention period, that are more detailed. So because we get a lot of videos that sometimes come in that they're blurry, so it's like, I know that's probably a male, but then besides that, you can't get too good of facial characteristics or anything to be able to work with, essentially. So or a license plate. You can get a make and model, but once you get past that, you can tell that it's maybe Texas, but it's it gets blurred, and then you have to kind of.
Well, and it is 2022. We've had HD for a long time now. People probably should be upgrading their systems a bit.
But then besides that, just if it seems like somebody, I think it's like 55% of active shooters have a relationship to the place. So if there's somebody who's an ex-employee, or you had somebody that was, stealing from your business, whatever it might be, and there's any kind of bad blood or bad dynamic there, have that on your radar. And so if they show up, or if there's strange things that start happening to where, somebody's, graffiti, something where they're trying to damage the appearance of something, then take that into consideration. And it's much easier to document anything that seems off, and then that way you can prove and have evidence for it. And obviously, if there's any kind of crime or any kind of thing that's outright damage or anything that is overtly threatening, then they should be calling 911 and getting a police report going.
And so really what you're saying is no matter what it is, no matter how small it might seem, document it, because you don't want it to escalate to that next level.
Yes. And then you're able to establish trends. And so if it's building and getting to, there's a big, so the flip side of all of the training and the hardened security factors is the behavioral element. And so that's one of the things, like we have a whole threat management team that's with the police department where we've been trained at NBITA. It's a threat management national certification. And that essentially allows you to interact with somebody, but then also be able to determine what the risk factors are for them to escalate. And so, like, we get a lot of reports like that, and we want them, like it's the whole see something, say something. So if your spidey sense is off and you're like, that doesn't feel right, we as a society have a tendency now to kind of like discredit it, call doubt in and be like, no, I'm just tired. No, I've been working long hours. No, I'm sure it's just me being paranoid because I watched that scary movie last night. So we have a ability to kind of discredit and discount those thoughts, and when 9 times out of 10, like, you're on to something. And then, like, that's why you get so many people when you do actually have an incident that they're like, looking back on things, A, B, and C was there. Yeah. And it kind of has clicked. And
I think people forget that we've survived this long because of those types of...
They're very innate, yeah.
Yeah, and to discount them at this point is kind of, I guess you do so at your own risk. We're still, not that far removed from basically that being the only way you were going to survive.
Right. And we've gotten away from the community aspect of things, unfortunately. So there's not like that collective efficacy of things. So it's a lot easier for me to discount it because I don't want to cause trouble for anybody else than it is for me to actually take action upon that and then be somebody that is potentially, snitched on somebody or caused question for somebody and without having something proof written to go with.
Yeah.
But that can, again, cause issues. Ideally you don't want the proof, right? You don't want it to get to that point. So it's better to say something earlier. So
let's then, heaven forbid, we find ourselves in a situation, we're at work and the violence does erupt. What are the things that we as employees and managers should know and be doing?
From a business standpoint, if you were a standalone business and you've got the alarm systems and you can trigger it, by all means trigger it, because like that will initiate a response. I think that the damage that is occurred with active shooter type situations are generally related to the target availability, not to sound detached like that, but it's target availability and the response time, because I think it's like 74% of active shooters are killed by when the police actually respond. So they're either killed and or arrested or surrender. And then like the remaining percentage is where they've committed suicide. But it's generally after the police have arrived on scene. Yeah. And so like it helps to go through any of the drills and stuff. So that way you can be kind of prepared from the psychological element. Like fight or flight is a very real thing, and so it helps to kind of go through in your mind what you would do if somebody came in with a gun right now, whether it's to cause as much damage as possible or whether it's just to rob for money, and they don't actually plan on hurting somebody. Those situations can go sideways pretty quickly. And so being able to think of, okay, what would I do, what would my initial steps be, like where do I have reinforced walls? I know it sounds silly, but nowhere sheetrock is bullets are just going to go through that. So what is penetratable, what isn't, and then it kind of went from run, hide, fight to now avoid, deny, defend. And so you want to kind of, if you can avoid a situation, like don't if you hear shots and you're in a strip center, don't run towards the shots or wait. Like if it's something that you're like, nope, that wasn't right, like go the opposite direction. Of course, you have to be careful if you're in like a large grocery store or something, because you're going to get echoes and stuff.
Yeah.
So you just want to be conscious of that, but the main thing being avoid it for all intensive purposes. Know where your emergency exits are. Know how, like, you wouldn't want to have a back door to a store that has a big padlock that you would then have to have, the dexterity to get a key in to unlock so that you could then exit. Like, if you're there, you need to have crash bar or start rethinking a way to do that so that you can get a quick out if you need to. Because ultimately, when push comes to shove, nobody wants to get hurt and lose their life, and property can be replaced.
Yeah.
I understand that it's some, heartfelt, and especially for business owners who their life has, put into whatever they're selling or service that they're giving, but it's not worth it. Just get out. And then, so after that, you want to try and deny them by locking the door, putting stuff in front of it, finding a way to communicate that you need help or that somebody is actively aggressing. I don't want to harp on the active shooter element, because I'm sure that you've seen there's a lot of people with swords or stabbings lately. So that I don't want to make it seem like it's only ever going to be gunshots, unfortunately. And then the other thing is just going to be, if push comes to shove, it's not you fight, and so defend. That's throw stuff at them, do whatever you can do. Like, if you end up calling 911, just leave the phone line open and hide the phone. Like, and you'll have dispatch on the other side that'll be able to kind of try and gather information.
Yeah. And I think what we found out in a lot of these instances is schools in particular, but retail wasn't designed to have a lot of ways in or out. It's designed to keep you there. And so those are particularly, I go into a store and I'm like, I start thinking about that. Like, if something does happen, there's not a whole lot of places to go to.
Right. Yeah.
And
if you have somewhere like, if you have somewhere like a grocery store where you're like, okay, I'm halfway down aisle 4, it's easy for officers responding to be like, okay, I've got an area to go to. If you have one of those stores where you've got sections, I don't know, we've got like babies versus, women's something or other, sportswear, like, if you're not familiar with that store, it's not a national brand or something like that, like, you're not going to know where to go to. So it's always good to know your north, south, east, or west, or have a reference point. Like, I'm near the door closest to the freeway, or I'm on the north side, I think, and it seems like shots are coming from southwest corner. Something that's given them a point of reference. That pinpoint information is hugely important. I can't emphasize that enough, especially even if you are the person that is avoiding. So therefore, whenever you respond, you're out the door. If you know that you saw a shooter and what the shooter was wearing, like, give us the head to toe and let us know the direction of travel, type of weapons or multiple weapons, whether one or two of them, and what direction were they heading. Because that way we have, if people are doing that as they're running by, then we can then respond accordingly.
Yeah.
Because it does take, there's a lot of solo entry training and stuff right now. It's just a stop the killing is, that's all we're worried about. But there's also the consideration of, like, if you get, like, so if we have somebody on campus that calls 911 from their cell phone, it's going to loop over to GPD. GPD might have different information than we would have. And so if they're coming in from one side and we're coming in from another side, that could end up in a not so good situation. And so the more intel that we have, the more that we can coordinate and have a more informed response. That way we can kind of neutralize the threat quicker.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of this is, I'm with a financial institution, so we do robbery training every year, but it's about thinking about it, right? It's about being more aware and not just kind of going through the motions and really paying attention.
Yeah, situational awareness is a huge thing. It's even if it's somebody walking into your store and they've got a baggy shirt, but they happen to turn a certain way, and you'll happen to see, like, they've got a holster or something, or the person that is, we're in Texas, especially, everybody carries pocket knives and stuff like that. But you've got some people that have, like, really large weapons. If somebody comes in a trench coat and it's, the summer, anything that could be, or over, like, we've had guitar cases, something that could conceal something relatively easily, then that, pay attention to it. And then if it's out of place, particularly for your business or what the surroundings are, then respond accordingly. It's always better to have somebody. I know the call volume can get heavy and stuff, but I would rather us respond to a suspicious activity and have somebody check out and be like, okay, all good, like, our apologies, have a great
Yeah.
day, than the opposite.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised how much, once you start paying attention to people's profiles and people's behaviors, how you can get a lot of information from that.
So we have police that work security for us at all of our branches, and so you kind of you become friends with them, and you learn a lot more. And I remember I've called the cops so many times because I see something that doesn't make sense. Like I'll remember I was driving past the elementary school, and I saw a car parked across the street with a guy with a camera. I didn't hesitate, called, found out it was a custody dispute. So it was okay, but that's the kind of stuff that people need to pay attention to.
Yeah, we have a habit of not, unfortunately, at this point.
Yeah.
It's well, that's not really my business, so I'll leave it alone.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's just better to be safe than sorry.
So how long have you been doing this?
10 years.
And what got you into policing, and then particularly, I guess, policing at a university?
Oh, that's a long answer. So I got interested. I just started reading books when I was like a young teenager, and so I was interested in the serial murders and all that stuff. And then I came across a couple of cases that were interesting because people could lawyer up and buy their way out of things, and so that always like added a different dynamic to things. So I found that interesting, and then it kind of went from there. Like I just got interested in everything. So I went to school I did things backwards. I went to school first. And then in part of my research, I was at the Texas Police Chiefs Conference, and I ended up sitting and having lunch with one of the groups of chiefs, and I said, how many of you would hire a graduate student as a brand new officer? And like everybody put their head down, but the chief that was next to me, and that was the chief at UTMB.
Okay.
And so I applied like 2 years later.
So UTMB, we talk about this with the doctors and everything. It's got a really great culture, and I guess that should help with policing, right?
Yes, it does. It's very. I think we do have a very good community policing relationship going. We want to make sure that we're not always just there to enforce. We're there to make sure that everybody feels safe, because you're only as effective at policing our community and our little neighborhood as you are their ability to feel safe and doing what they would need to do. Like they need to take care of people and know that if somebody's come in and they're on PCP, or somebody's come in and had a psychotic break, or somebody's just not handling, I don't know, especially like visitation policy. Like that's been a whole lot for people, given COVID restrictions and stuff. It's a way to de-escalate, but yet let them know, like, okay, you can do your work safely, and we can make sure that everything's going to be okay here and not rise to the point where it's going to blow up.
Well, I'm going to pay you guys a huge compliment, because most of my doctors are UTMB doctors, and I have never seen a police force as present as yours. Every time I go to my doctor, and you guys are ever present, and I think that's pretty remarkable in this day and age.
Thank you. Yeah, we work pretty hard at that.
So we talked a little bit about, what we as business owners or, should be doing during an episode of workplace violence. But as the police, you have kind of a unique role, and people might, I hate to, for the lack of a better word, you might not be able to help them right away because your primary role is to take care of the situation.
So it's like the solo officer entry that I brought up, like, originally, or years back, it would be that you would always formulate a team and go in as a contact team. But even now, it's like the emphasis is just stop the killing as quickly as you can. So you're not going to wait on backup if you can't, like if they're a ways out for whatever reason. And so the main thing is going out there and neutralizing the threat. You can't have those type situations are more damaging the more target availability you have, more people that are around. So if I stop and help people as I'm going, or I'm stopping and questioning as I'm going, even though I understand the information is important, but at the same time, like I'm going to have to walk by people that are actively bleeding out and may even lose their life, because otherwise I just have to neutralize the threat.
Yeah.
And that's, I know that's something that a lot of people have a hard time grasping, but it's just going to end up with more of the people that I'm walking by if I don't go and neutralize the threat. So the priority is always to take care of the active attack.
Well, it's to make it safe so that people
Right.
that have the training can come in behind you and
Right.
take care of the wounded.
And trust the fact that there's already, like, once you've got multiple teams that are going in, there's already rescue teams that are setting up. And there is a lot of coordinated training going on right now between different, like, it's multidisciplinary. So you've got EMS that's wearing bulletproof vests now, and you've got rescue trainers or rescue police that are on the contact team that are EMS trained. So that, I mean, when we're saying we're walking by people, obviously there's tunnel vision and everything, but I'm just scanning for a threat and then responding. But once you start having multiple people come in, or it's slowed down even just a bit, like it might be that I'll pull a tourniquet out and throw it to you and keep going. But my priority is not to render aid at that point.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's just going to end up causing more harm if I do anything otherwise.
Yeah. And we already kind of hit on it, but you're in a healthcare setting, and that is probably one of the fastest growing segments of workplace violence.
Yeah, the healthcare setting has become, it's like an epidemic right now as far as workplace violence in that setting. There's, like I said, people are frustrated, but mental health services are overwhelmed, and or people have had a different amount of stressors because of the pandemic and, you know, economic factors and all that stuff. So people are already on edge. They're not able to get the resources or the services. Like, we don't have an inpatient psychiatric hospital in Galveston County. So if we have to take somebody to where they need to get fully institutionalized, we have to take them up to Houston. And so there's a delay in the amount of resources that are adequately available on site, you know, quickly. And so, like, for that reason, like, we have a lot of dealings with mental health people that are in a bad shape of crisis, or been off medication, and there's sometimes a comorbidity factor with them using a lot of drugs too. So it's the drugs or the mental health or a combination of both. And that can cause a lot of tense interactions and threats, assaults, and otherwise. And so, yeah, workplace violence has gone up quite a bit. We had 56 incidents at UTMB last year.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them are in the ER. But so we usually have officers posted there. There's a lot of things that we're doing to try and make sure that we can respond as quickly as we can, or be there to prevent it. And then there's a big outreach right now in training and educating the medical staff, or anybody for that matter, to include students and anybody else, to make sure that they are, like, situational awareness again is a big thing, but you're in a confined space when you're in a patient room. So don't put yourself at a disadvantage where you're behind, you know, a bed. There's a huge medical bed. And then if that person aggresses and gets up, like, you're now, like, the aggressor's between you and help, or you and your exit. So understanding that when you have a confined space, training on pre-attack indicators, so the clenched fist, people like starting to breathe heavy, like 1,000-yard stare, those type things are all indicators that things are escalating quickly. And like I said, pre-attack indicators. So
Yeah.
those are self-explanatory. But being able to make sure that people are playing an active role in their own defense. Like, one of the best ways to de-escalate a situation is to disengage and walk away. And that's there's a huge emphasis right now with policing generally for de-escalation right now, and verbal judo, being able to talk people down. But we have a tendency of, like, just as humans, to try and talk through it, and the best way to do it is to disengage and give yourself, like, let the situation breathe for a second and then go back. And that applies to businesses and anybody else.
That applies to my personal life.
But yeah, so we've done a lot with that. We've got really high grade camera system across campus. I think we've got like 2,000 cameras. It's an insane amount. They've got like facial recognition, and we can ask it to look for, it's got an analytics program that comes with it. So we can ask it to look for a white male with a backpack that walks through, and it's going to sim through and only show us the white males with a backpack. And so that's a really good, it saves a lot of time because we're not going through systems for hours or days on end to try and look for clues. And we've also got gunshot detection. So it's an automatic response from us. It's not going to wait for somebody to call 911 because even that response time is going to save us a lot of very important seconds or minutes.
Well, it sounds like between the technology and the training, you told us we had 54 or 56 incidents.
Last year.
And I didn't hear about any of them in the news, so that's obviously a good indicator that the training is working.
Yeah, we're trying.
So, well, thank you for the information. I appreciate it.
Thank you.